This is a theory video based off of both book and show clues. This video may contain spoilers for those who are not up to date with the show and books. Please enjoy. Hi, I'm Raylene, and welcome to Khaleesi Clues. Today's video is going to be about the big mystery man, the Night King. We don't know much about him, but I think I may have figured out a new theory. So, shall we begin? Okay, so it's been about 3 weeks since my last two videos. We had the Easter holiday in, and then I kind of blew up my phone. So, had a little bit of problems getting some videos made. Like I said, I'm new, so I'm learning all the ins and outs of doing videos, and I know absolutely nothing about the videos. I'm kind of like the Jon Snow of these YouTube videos. So if you can, be patient with me, and you know, hopefully you'll like this video too. And I'll try to make it as clear as I can, because it is a new theory for me, so it's really kind of confusing for me to even try and explain it. I'm not as familiar with it as I was with my first two theories. So we'll get started. Okay, so in the show, we were able to see how the White Walkers began. We got to witness through Bran's vision, Leaf turning this stranger up against a tree, tied up, and she shoved the dragon glass into his chest, and he turned into the first White Walker. And I always wondered, it's like, you know, they only showed the one guy. And then, of course, we have the Night King. So we're assuming that that is the main guy, the number one guy. And it's like, you know, he's able to make White Walkers, or at least we're assuming he's able to make White Walkers, because of the episode with Craster's baby, whenever he put the baby on the altar and transformed the baby from a living baby to apparently like a little White Walker baby. Interesting. It's like, I would love to know if they grow up like just instantly? Do they have a nursery somewhere? Do they, how exactly does that work? You know, because it's just so many different questions that we have. And my thoughts about the Night King was the story that Old Nan had told to Bran about the White Walkers coming on their packs of ice spiders and all that. It's like, okay, well, there's more than one that came and attacked. I mean, and they turned, of course, all the dead into the whites that we see on TV and everything. And, you know, that's their army. So if Leaf and them only made one, he had to have made the others. And I would assume that would take some time. And that, you know, always kind of like stayed in the back of my mind. So as I was reading The World of Ice and Fire, again, trying to find clues for my beginning theory, I started like picking up different things. And one of the, I just have to basically start from the beginning of the Dawn Age. And they were talking about the children of the forest and the giants living there. Another thing that they mentioned in the Dawn Age section is that they said there was a possibility of a third race that had been in Westeros prior to the first men arriving there. That when the very first of the first men had traveled to the Iron Islands, that they discovered the Sea Stone Chair. And there was no inhabitants on the Iron Islands when they arrived there, but the Sea Stone Chair was already there. The Sea Stone Chair, if I remember right, is made of a black oily substance type. Like, of course, it's hard, but I think they said it might be like obsidian. I'd have to look that one back up. But it was similar to another monument found on some island. I think it was a frog, but it's basically the same material. And also the same material is on the high tower, like the base of the high tower. And I wanted you to keep that in mind, because I think that it could be a clue for something I'm going to talk about a little bit later in this video. So, but that was in the very first beginning of the Dawn Age. And then it said 8 to 12,000 years ago. They don't have a specific date, because this is done before there was any written record. So they're just going off of stories and the best guess that they can do. So 8 to 12,000 years ago, that's when the first men had arrived into Westeros. They came up through a land bridge that connected Essos and Westeros up through Dorne, and they started settling into Westeros, and they started cutting down the weirwood trees. And once they started doing that, that triggered the war between the children of the forest and the first men. The children of the forest attacked the first men for cutting down the weirwood trees. And then they warred for hundreds of years. And both sides were suffering. The children of the forest were outnumbered. First men were bigger. We had better weapons. And they were just completely outnumbered. The children knew that they were going to eventually lose this war. They could slow us down, or us. I'm not part of it, but they could slow first men down. But they couldn't stop them. And so it said that they were drove to a desperate act. And next thing you know, it's talking about how the land bridge was flooded, and that it was most likely, well, not most likely, but that it had been hinted to that it was the Greenseers practicing dark magic at, I think it was Moat Cailin, to call up the waters and, crash down and break up the landmass that connected the two lands together. But interesting to me was that the first men were already there, and so breaking the land bridge really wouldn't do much help for the children of the forest in regards to the first men, because they were already there. So I'm thinking that possibly could have been done for a different reason, even though in the books it's wanting you to think it's to fight against the first men. I think with the children of the forest and their green sight ability, we're able to see something else. And I'll talk about that in just a little bit. But after the landmass was broke, then I believe that's when the wisest of the children of the forest and the first men decided to meet and have a truce. And they met on the Isle of Faces, or what became the Isle of Faces, and decided that they would stop warring. And the children of the forest agreed to give the first men all the land except for the forest. And the first men agreed to stop chopping down the weirwood trees. And I believe they took on their religious beliefs. They started worshiping the same gods, and it was passed on, and the North still practices the same type of religion. Once the pact was agreed between the children of the forest and the first men, it made, the Dawn Age came to a close, and a new age began, and it was called the Age of Heroes. And the children of the forest and the first men lived peacefully together for thousands of years, it said. And then the long night came. And I always thought that the long night had come, that the White Walkers came to fight the first men. But the children of the forest and the first men were already living in peace for thousands of years. And so it made me think back to the earlier paragraph when the book was talking about the children of the forest being forced to do a desperate act, and how on the TV series it shows Leaf creating the first White Walker, and how she said, we were desperate, we were losing the war, and they had basically made the White Walkers to protect them, and she said against you, but she's referring to man, like not necessarily the first men, but man in general. So that made me think of another theory that with all the different clues that are being placed around in the world of Ice and Fire. Okay, so the long night has now descended on the first men and the children of the forest. And mostly it actually kind of descended on the first men, because the children of the forest at that point had gone deep into the forest. They were basically, not even a part of Westeros anymore. They were just kind of hidden and kind of reclusive, keeping to themselves more so. And in the show, it showed that the children of the forest made the first White Walker. And it didn't show, like when it panned up, it didn't show like a whole bunch of men, like captive. It only showed one guy tied to that tree. And when Old Nan tells the story to Bran, she's talking about how the first time the White Walkers came, and they came on their packs of ice spiders, big as hounds. So there was more than one guy, and which makes sense, because it's like, what's one guy going to do? And it made me start thinking, what exactly was the purpose of them making a White Walker? What is one guy going to do in defense for the children of the forest against all these numbers of first men coming? And I thought that one guy must be somebody special, I would think. And I've heard theories about him being a Stark. I've heard theories about him being a Bolton. I've heard theories about him being a Targaryen. And I think that I may have figured out who he is. Maybe not exactly who he is, but maybe in general. So remember back when we were talking about the children of the forest being forced to do a desperate act, and that the land bridge between Essos and Westeros was broken. I don't think that was the desperate act that they did. I think the desperate act that they performed was the creation of the first White Walker. And I think they did that because, and I think the reason why they broke the land bridge was not because of the first men, but I think they had a vision of what was to come. I think they could see the arrival of the Andals and the destruction that was going to happen with the Andals, because the Andals were just horrible. They were cutting everything down and burning everything and defeating everybody. And so I think that desperate act wasn't to fight the first men. It was to possibly fight or have a way to fight what was coming even further into the future, the Andals. But it went wrong. It went way wrong. And I have a theory about what possibly happened with that too. You have to remember that in the North, how important the guest right law or rule is to the Northern people. It is basically the same as if you harm a guest, then it's basically the same as like kinslaying. It's a horrible, evil act in their eyes. So who is this mystery man that the children of the forest have tied up to the weirwood tree? And I think that he is a Valyrian, and not just any old Valyrian. I think he is a dragon lord. And the reason, I have a couple of different reasons why I think this. Number one, the coloring of like his hair, even though they don't do the white or the blonde hair or the bright blue eyes or the purple eyes. The coloring of his hair is definitely lighter. He doesn't look like a Stark or what I would think like the first men would look like. And the other thing is, I think that the desperate act that the children of the forest did, I think they were trying to get a weapon. I think they could see that the Andals were coming, and it says the Green Seers are able to see events happening from far distances and very far into the future. And they could see the rise of Valyria and how the Valyrians end up conquering, I think it said like most of the lands over in Essos, that their dragons enabled them to defeat basically everybody and anybody that got in their way. And they pretty much did so. They were defeating everybody. That's what drove the Andals out of Essos and into Westeros, is the Valyrians were enslaving everybody. They were, defeating all the lands and enslaving them. So and remember what I talked about the sea stone chair and about the high tower, about the base of the high tower being made of the same material that the sea stone chair is made of. And there was another monument on another island that had, I think it was a frog. I think they made some type of frog. I think that might have been possibly made by a Valyrian dragon lord. I think, it doesn't say it in the books, it's just something that I think. I think the Valyrians were kind of exploring, looking for new lands to expand, conquer, and see what different lands had. If there was anything of value there that they could, like, hey, that would be, they had a lot of gold here. Let's go to this land and, we'll start mining for gold there, or whatever it is, to get power. And I think that the children of the forest either invited through communicating across half a realm, or happened to stumble across him as an explorer. And I think they must have said, like, hey, communicated with him somehow to come back. And I think they tricked him. I think they, basically said, come back and learn about us, or see what we're about. And when he went with them, they tied him up to a tree and basically kind of experimented on him. And I think that broke the guest right rule. And as Bran told that story to Jojen and them, when they were staying in one of the, I think it was at the wall or around the wall, they were staying, and he was talking about the rat cook, and how that even the gods could not forgive the rat cook breaking the guest right rule, and that they had turned him into the rat cook, and he was constantly hungry and never-ending hunger and eating his own children, and that his hunger was never satiated. It just never ended. And that's kind of like the White Walkers. I mean, they just kind of kill and kill, and it's like never ending. So to me, it's kind of like whatever the children of the forest were doing, whether it was dark magic or blood magic, since it was kind of like a sacrifice up against a tree, maybe, whatever it was that they were doing, it backfired on them tremendously. And because of that guest right rule, and it created the White Walkers. And another reason why I believe it's a Dragon Lord is I think they were trying to basically make the Dragon Lord in their control, so that they would be able to have dragons to fight off the Andals and eventually the Valyrians, because eventually the Valyrians would be coming anyways. Like Khaleesi said, a dragon is not a slave. They couldn't control him. And that, I think it must have been, once he was turned, almost immediately they would have lost control of him, because you got to think of, like, here's this guy tied up to a tree, and he's turned into this creature, and what would be the immediate happening? What would happen immediately after? I mean, they had to have lost control of him quickly. I mean, everything he's touching basically turns to ice. So he would be able to break free from the ropes that was on him, because everything he touches is freezing. It showed in the vision that Bran had, that it wasn't always frozen in the lands of always winter. That where he was turned was that same tree that they later showed, where it's all frozen, and then it has the symbol around the tree. And then the spearhead and everything, and that's where the Hound and them met with Jon to grab the white. So it wasn't always frozen there, but him and his power has turned all that land into an icy desert. And so, like, those the ropes that was on him, he could have broke free from that. Once it freezes and stuff, it's just gonna probably crumble away. And so, you know, how was he able to, you know, get away? That's something that, you know, we're going to have to wait and see in the show or the books, because he was able to get away and create more White Walkers. At least I'm assuming, because if the one goes wrong, I don't think you're going to turn around and make a whole bunch of other same ones, you know, then you're going to have even more of a headache. So I think once they turned him, he was able to get away. And then all the time when, from the beginning of that, when they performed that desperate act, up until the time the long night came, that was a lengthy period of time. I think that's when he actually created the other White Walkers. And then they attacked. And then, you know, came after the children of the forest and First Men. So, and then what has brought them this second time? And what, you know, how were they beaten back the first time? That's something we don't know yet either. And like they mentioned also, were they actually defeated the first time? Or was it another pact of some sort? And that I'm going to go into in another video. I have some clues about, or some ideas about what these symbols mean in the caves, and what the White Walkers started again for, and what they may want. So that's going to be in some other videos that will tie into the other theories that I have for the last two videos. So I hope you liked my theory of who the Night King possibly, or the first White Walker possibly is. I do believe he is a Valyrian Dragon Lord. And I do have a theory coming out, probably 2 more videos coming out, that's going to tie in to my previous 2 videos. So if you haven't watched the previous 2 videos, it would be great. Go and check them out. It was The Return of Khal Drogo, and also the a theory for New Dragons for Season 8. And again, if you enjoyed the video, hit the like and subscribe for my next couple of videos coming out. Thanks, and hope to talk to you guys soon.